thank you all for coming out this evening and joining us here at Revolution Brewery in Chicago. And thank you to the Revolution folks for hosting us. A big round of applause for them. 2 years in a row, guys. Thank you. We have got three great folks coming up here this evening to join us for a couple of discussions, and I'll introduce them now just so you know who to expect if you haven't read the agenda. Donn Bichsel is the Sales and Marketing Director here at Revolution, and he'll be sitting down with me for a one-on-one interview in just a minute, and then we'll take a short break after we're done chatting so you guys can refill your glasses. We'll come back and we'll be chatting with Robert Finkel, the founder and root master at Forbidden Root, and Andres Araya, who is the founder and CEO of Five Rabbit Cerveceria. And so really looking forward to all these conversations tonight. But this whole thing wouldn't be possible without our sponsors. And I'll pay the bills right now, as it were, by saying thank you to Avery Dennison, Owens, Illinois, Vicinity Brew, Markham Homage, BDO, Patainer, Keg ID, Pro Chillers, Pack Tech, and Prairie Capital Advisors. A lot of these folks have been sponsoring all of our events all year long, helping us move around the country. We're hosting 6 of these events this year. This is our 5th one. And without those guys, we wouldn't be able to travel all over the country, bring all this gear that you see, live stream these events. So thank you guys for making this all possible. And with that, I will call up Mr. Donn Bichsel, who requested his own walk-up music. Come on, Donn. Oh, no walk-up music, sorry. I'm not going to sing for you, Donn.
Yeah. Something that can make you do wrong, make you do right. Yeah.
Is that your new incentive?
Hey, we're back again.
I feel so far away from you. I'm going to move over. Thank you for having us.
Thanks to Josh for letting us do this again. It's always good to look out into the room and see so many friendly industry faces and some new ones. It's amazing how quickly our industry evolves and changes day after day and week after week.
Yeah, and that's a lot of what we're actually going to be talking about. But before we do, let's catch up a little bit. What's the latest here at Revolution? I know you guys are expanding distribution, or you have expanded distribution into Wisconsin and New York coming up here soon. So what's the latest and greatest, Donn?
Yeah, some big moves for us. We've been looking at the New York market for a long time and, kind of taking some trips there, looking for opportunities, looking for, retail and distributor partners. And we finally have a signed contract, and we can talk about it, that we're going to go with Manhattan Beer. They are one of the largest distributors in the United States, and we think that they're going to be a great partner for us in New York. We're going to launch the first week of October. We've got some good events planned and sending out a pretty big team out there to launch. Wisconsin kind of snuck up on us a little bit. We had an opportunity due to increased capacity to look at markets that we weren't necessarily looking at till a little further down the road, and an opportunity presented itself up in Wisconsin, and we quietly launched the market in June. We just have a signed contract as of today. So we are official in the state of Wisconsin with General Beverage and General Beer. 5 distributors up there. It doesn't fill out the entire state, but gives us the majority of the population and the largest share of the retail market up there.
Awesome. So quietly launching in Wisconsin, but hopefully not so quietly launching in New York?
Yeah, definitely a different tact. We kind of like to go into markets and kind of act like we've always been there. I think that there's been a trend in our marketplace, and I think it's calmed down a little bit in recent years, of people to go into a market and try to dominate it right away. Large stacks of beer on the floor, massive tap takeovers throughout the marketplace, and I think that you find that they don't last very long.
Yeah.
I think sometimes the bigger you go out, the quicker you go down. So kind of like we did in Massachusetts, we launched Wisconsin like we'd always been there. No major events, no large announcements on social media, no big ad buys. We didn't put a person in the marketplace. which kind of goes against what I normally think. But we felt that we could early on service the marketplace here locally, and we did a nice job of it this summer, and so far it's been very successful.
How much of that was just testing the waters to see if it would even, be a profitable venture for you guys?
Yeah, it was completely that. I mean, we did that in Massachusetts. And the story is pretty much similar. In the Massachusetts market, we had Extreme Beer Fest, which was happening, and we got an entry into that 3 years ago, I believe, was the first time, and we participated. Maybe it's been 4 years now. And in year 2, we decided to send some beer along with our beer that was going to the festival and just kind of see what happened. And the beer quickly evaporated. I mean, we put it in the right spots, didn't do any big events, and it sold through very well. So 6 months later, we decided to launch. They have arguably, it's the best beer festival in the United States here in Wisconsin. And we decided once again, surrounding the timing of that we would quietly bring a few trucks up into Wisconsin and see what happens. And the response was overwhelming.
Right. So where do you guys expect to finish out the year then, production-wise?
So still,
which I know it's not where you want it to be.
Yeah, no, nothing sometimes is ever where you really want it to be. But no, we're quite happy. I'll put a number on it. I think that Krista, Josh's wife and owner of the company, pegged a number at around 70. I think my number is 77,714. I think is the number which is on my board. We're hoping somewhere between 75 and 80,000.
Is this like guessing the M&Ms in the jar? Is that like what you guys do here?
Yeah, it's definitely guessing M&Ms in a jar. I picked green this year, and it turned out to be a little bit of blue. So.
All right. So 70, let's call it 75,000 barrels, split the difference about. That's still, half of your capacity here. I mean, you guys have some big tanks outside, and you guys just recently got a new brew house, kind of up and online and running early this year. So, you guys are only operating at 50% capacity. I don't run a brewery, but I talk to a lot of people who do, and they tell me that, you typically want that percentage to be a little bit higher.
Yeah, and looking at our finishing number, we're definitely going to finish shy of, half of what we could produce. But a little bit of it is skewed in the fact that we had hoped our new brew house was going to be online in August of last year. I believe that we started really brewing out of it in January of this year. So we were about 4 or 5 months behind what we had initially anticipated. And we're spending a little bit of time here playing catch up. And we had hoped to do 95 to 100,000 barrels this year, and we were probably a little bit ahead of where we thought we could come in, but that was all predicated on the thought of having the new brew house in on time. And I mean, like anything else, or in any new construction, or or construction in general, the timelines are always a little bit off. And we had a lot of trust to regain in the marketplace as far as with our retailers and with our distributor partners. And we are now brewing on a 100,000 barrel pace. I anticipate that being around the number moving forward.
Okay. So we'll get to the trust stuff with the retailers and the distributors in a minute, but in thinking about some of your own expansions, your distribution expansions, how much of those are being driven by the fact that you guys just simply need to move product at this point?
I'd like to say none of it. I think that we like to think that we have a long-term plan, and we do. I think Wisconsin was probably predicated by opportunity of excess capacity and an opportunity to move forward on something that I probably had thought that we'd put off for another year or two. But we found ourselves in a position that, we had built all this capacity to be able to handle our lagers. I mean, where we kind of ran ourselves aground couple years in a row was with our lagers, our Oktoberfest. It ate up all of our capacity coming into the big summer months here in the Midwest. And, this time around, we kind of got a little ahead of it, thinking that we were going to be able to keep the market flush throughout the entire summer. And we started running a little bit heavier than we'd like to with our days on hand. We like to keep things very tight, keep things at about 15 days on hand to keep the beer fresh throughout the marketplace. And we found ourselves creeping up to 20, 25 days on a couple of products. And that there was an opportunity to either slow down the brew house or look for opportunities to give our consumers beer that they'd been wanting for a long time. But we had just chosen not to move forward with giving them.
Right, but there's a practical reason, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, for some of these distribution expansions. I mean, you guys do have the capacity. You're going to need to fill those tanks eventually, and in our conversation earlier, it seemed like not all of that is coming from the Illinois marketplace now.
No, during the times that we ran out of beer a couple years in a row, and got a little ahead of our skis in some of the promises I made to retail, and kind of promising some of our chain partners that we'd be able to keep them in beer. We had to pull back from different facets of the marketplace, and during the time that we kind of ran low on beer in the summer of 2014 and once again in the summer of 2015, the marketplace changed. It's always evolving, as you can see in this room and see in the new faces. There's new breweries that have opened. I mean, we're up to 150, 160 breweries currently in Illinois, and I know the Brewers Guild's here. They can probably help with the real number later, but...
Which is great, yeah. Round of applause for that. A lot of growth.
And I believe that there's almost 100 now in Chicago proper. So, shelves got filled with other products. And we've had to, as I said, alluded to earlier, get ourselves back deep into the game.
Yeah, and that's a tough position to be in. I mean, it's great that all these new breweries are coming online, and many of them are, having some early success out of the gates, and retailers are taking them seriously. But that means that a company like Revolution doesn't all of a sudden have 9 or 10 spots on the shelf with bombers and cans. It's only got 3 or 4 spots on the shelf for cans or bombers. Take your pick. So how did you guys handle that?
Well, we've kind of handled it a couple of different ways. Our bomber business is one that we were never in love with as far as from the brewer's standpoint. We used a Maheen system, which a lot of breweries use, and the DO readings, I think we do it better than most, but obviously the quality doesn't stand up over time, and we were finding that some of those bottles weren't moving as quickly as they had when we had first launched. We made a decision to get ourselves out of the bomber market. We're down to just one every day, which is our Cross of Gold, an award-winning beer in its own right, and it's the last man standing for right now. And then all of our barrel-aged beers, all the wonderful barrels you see right here, all those still go into bombers. But, it was more of a squeeze as well. I mean, if you're not performing and turning, retailers have other options on their shelves. And most of the new breweries that open up now with 22-ounce bombers. So
retailers essentially told you, pick your weapon, and here's what we're giving you, so adjust or that's it?
We rely an awful lot on binnies here in the marketplace to move some of our large format, and the opportunities to maintain consistent cooler placements on these products weren't always there, and that slowed down velocity, and in turn, it ended up having beer that was a little bit older than we really wanted in the market, and we decided to shift more into cans. I mean, we are a canning brewery, and in a certain extent, we closed down our points of distribution, but it was also forced by the retailers and the consumers. Right. I mean, even more so. I know you and I talked about this, and I wanted to get to it before I forget. Was a great example came from the gentleman that works for us up in the northern suburbs, and it's a very large retailer that handles a lot of craft beer, and it's Whole Foods. They won't care if I say it. But Whole Foods in Evanston. And I've talked to the buyer about this. I mean, it's in this store in Evanston, they're very limited with space. And we used to have every single can that we made, anything we made, every bomber we made was in this set, no matter what. Now the buyer has told us, and we are one of the leaders in the marketplace. And they've told us that to pick 3. So we're now in a situation where we're picking 3. And, we're working with it to make sure our best movers are in there. But if a brewery like Revolution and a brewery like Lagunitas and Goose Island and some of the ones that scan very well in IRI data and Nielsen data are being asked to pick 3, I mean, that kind of affects how much you can sell in the marketplace.
Right. And that effectively puts, some kind of ceiling on what you're able to do here in the state of Illinois?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely changes your portfolio thoughts. I mean, you're not going to continue to grow, some of our SKUs that we're doing 5-10% of our overall business, like Bottom Up Wit and Eugene Porter, which I think is a unique animal in its own because not a lot of people make a year-round porter. But we introduced Rev Pills this year, and Bottom Up Wit wasn't going to continue its growth with another 5% beer in there because the access to the shelf and the access to cooler placements wasn't there. It was pick your poison, pick what you wanted to go with. And here in this marketplace, we've kind of chosen that we want to have Fist City and Rev Pills, which are Illinois-only beers, represented and on the shelves, and so something had to give.
Interesting. So knowing that you guys had only so much run room here in the state, at least for the short term. I mean, how things play out in the long term, is anybody's guess, right? But knowing that you guys, had to fill some of those tanks in there, is that sort of what led you to start kind of readjusting your strategy? Because for the longest time, it was, let's just stay as close to home as possible.
Yeah, and I think we could have done that. I mean, I think it just keeps evolving over time what type of brewery, Josh wants to have, and to take advantage of giving our brewers, at the platform to be able to show off their world-class beers. And I think that, I think in a perfect world we could be New Glarus. I think New Glarus would be a wonderful model for everybody to be and to sell. It's 150,000 barrels of beer here, but
right.
That's not the brewery we've chosen to be. We've chosen to offer up our beers to large metropolitan markets where I think our beers play very well. And we could have stopped. I mean, I think Josh had built out 70,000 barrels in the initial run out, and we probably could have built up slowly to there and stopped. But I think that there was enough of a demand out there from both the consumers and from our retail partners. I mean, chains don't just exist here in Illinois. They exist, in Ohio and in New York and Pennsylvania, et cetera.
So if you could have grown slower, why didn't you?
Is this the part that you're going to make me look bad about my dart throwing? Because this was a runaway train. I mean, we could not brew enough beer to take care of the marketplace, and we just didn't know where that wall was, and we haven't hit that wall by any means. But I think that we would brew more beer and it would just disappear, and we'd brew more beer and it would disappear. And there was a timing aspect of it. There was no brewery with scale. And scale at that time, I mean, even at 70,000 plus barrels was big scale.
Right.
But there was no other brewery that existed, and this is just 4.5 years ago, that had that scale to fill what we didn't realize was just such a dry desert. I mean, we were selling and still continue to sell 60,000 barrels within, I don't know how many miles it is up to Wisconsin and how many miles it is down to Joliet and how many miles it is to Aurora, but the majority of our sales are still right here.
Right.
And we haven't stopped selling. We're still up here in this marketplace 10, 15%. We should end up 20% here at the end of the year. But I don't remember the question. What was the question? I got lost.
That's convenient, Donn.
Yeah, it's good enough.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are still up here. You guys are still selling a lot of beer here. But, from our conversation earlier and kind of what I'm hearing now, it sounds like it's tempered a little bit. There have been, a lot of sort of factors in the marketplace that have contributed to perhaps slower growth. It's not the runaway train that it once was. Now you guys are starting to readjust and kind of try to figure things out, and that's not necessarily a unique position to be in. I think there are probably a lot of breweries that got to your size very quickly, or maybe to just smaller than Revolution, and have pretty quickly figured out here in 3/4 of the way through 2016 that the marketplace has changed. There are 4,700 breweries, and there are, companies that all were that runaway train that got to that size, took the next step on capacity, and are kind of staring at it now saying, oh shit, what do we do? So how have you, walk us through sort of your thought process of, kind of looking out at that now, knowing that it's a totally different marketplace than it was 2 years ago even, and a lot of what you built here today was based on what you thought 2 years ago.
The off-premise doesn't keep me up at night. I think that we still are price leaders in the marketplace. We've never discounted anything. We've never given away a case of beer. And I think that's really important to kind of repeat. I mean, we have never discounted anything. We've never given away anything. We've maintained our price point in the marketplace. And that's going to kind of affect growth over time as you fill the pipeline. I mean, I'm more concerned a little bit about the on-premise. The on-premise is really, where the marketplace has changed. I mean, whether you want to call it rotation nation or whatever it is you want to call it, we don't have two handles in every location anymore, or even 30% of the locations, or 20%, or 10%. I mean, we're very lucky to occasionally get two handles. I mean, and it hasn't obviously shaved our business in half, but it definitely has slowed down our on-premise growth. We were about 55 to 60% on-premise just a year ago, and we've now flipped to the other side where we are 55% on the off-premise side and 45% on the on-premise side. So I mean, that has definitely affected our overall growth. I mean, if both business models or both avenues aren't growing at the same rate, I mean, there's going to be a slowdown, and it's definitely been on-premise.
Right. What do you attribute that sort of flip-flop to? Is it just the amount of breweries that have entered the fray, or is it some of that sort of trust that we talked about earlier that we said we'd get to? You said you lost some trust in the marketplace. Maybe you could explain why you lost some trust from whether it was on-premise retailers or wholesalers or whomever, and what kind of effect that's having now.
I mean, I think trust is a huge factor. I mean, think about any business that anybody's in. I mean, if a retailer doesn't trust that they're going to dedicate, a shelf space to you, or dedicate a menu placement to you, and anticipate always having that beer available, you're going to lose your retailer's trust. But that, I think, is fixable, especially in Illinois, with it being chain driven. I think that we tried really hard to keep our chains full, and we really tried to keep our independents full, and we really tried to work with the local bottle shops to make sure that they were getting the fresh beer. We just kind of put things on allocations. The hardest factor was regaining the trust in our distributor partners. I mean, I think what people forget is that we only sell beer one time. I mean, we sell beer to our distributors. It's a 3-tiered system here in the United States. I can go out there and make as many chain calls as possible, and I can send our people out there and call on as many retailers as possible. But at the end of the day, it's our distributor partners that sell our beer. So it was regaining their trust, because they're the ones that got beat up every single day when we ran out of beer a couple years in a row. So I mean, it takes a lot for them to feel like they can go out there and offer up a revolution again. And then at the same time that, they had lost trust in us, Half Acre doubled, tripled, quadrupled their capacity. Lagunitas became a huge player here in this marketplace. And then, you go down the line, you got your Beguiles of the world and your Hopewells and, and Pipeworks, et cetera, et cetera. So everybody grew their capacity and had beer when we didn't. And, they decided to trust in them, and their distributor partners trusted in selling their product because they had it available.
And some of that was because you were telling them that you would be able to fill the demand, so they expected it, or?
Yeah, I probably wasn't quick enough to pull back. A lot of that falls on me. I guess, the chain cycles work in an interesting way. You get an opportunity to get into a chain in March or April, and you have the opportunity for them to pull the plug for you again when they do minor resets in October, November, and then you get your opportunity to get back again in the spring. I mean, I was always fearful that if we decided to tell them that, hey, we're going to run out of Anti-Hero for the summer, go ahead and pull us out, that we weren't going to get in for a full another year. So I don't think that we probably got ahead of it as quickly as we would have liked to. And I think there's always hope. You always hope that new brewery is going to come online a little quicker. Right. You always hope that you're going to have enough to fulfill the demand, and we just never did.
Right. like I said, I don't think that these are problems that another brewery hasn't had at one point in time, or that breweries, into the future will continue to have. I mean, everybody's gonna misforecast something and bet a little bit harder than they probably would like, and think that it'll be there, which is why it's important to discuss this stuff and sort of understand what the learnings are, because with 4,700 now, I think, breweries out there, all varying sizes. I mean, some are going to be taproom focused business models, and others are going to be trying to play in the distribution game. These are the types of things they need to understand. So looking kind of out into the space from your point of view, what do you think are going to be the biggest challenges for some of the newer folks that are have either been in the space for a few years and are really making a big bet on playing in that distribution game, or some of the ones that have yet to come online that want to be in that space? What are going to be the biggest challenges for those businesses?
I'll speak to the latter first. I think that one's a little bit easier. The hardest thing about going to marketplace now is that you sure better have a really strong retail. I mean, the one thing that we're blessed with here at Revolution is the backbone of having a strong brew pub, and the backbone of having a strong tap room, and be able to connect from our consumers from here. That's been very, very important to us. One of your next speakers is going to come up and talk a little bit about, they went the opposite way. They came out to marketplace before having a tap room, and it's a little bit more difficult. But I think it's going to be route to market. I think it's going to be route to market in multiple facets. I mean, you've got distributors now that, they don't want to take on any more brands. I mean, they don't really care who you are. I mean, there's one of the best breweries in the world that I know of that was looking for space in a distributor here in Illinois, and the distributor told them, hey, right now we're kind of out of space, and I was flabbergasted by the fact that it's reached that point that even some of the most acclaimed breweries are having a tough time getting a position in a distributorship. And then the other part of it is really going to be SKU management once you get there. How many SKUs they're even going to bring in? Are they going to bring in 3, 4, 5, 6 different styles? Are they going to carry sixtels and halves? Are they going to carry your full portfolio? So, I mean, I think that's initially it. And then after that, I mean, there's only so many tap handles out there, and we can continue to add tap handle after tap handle after tap handle, but at the end of the day, going from 16 to 32 tap lines doesn't mean that we're going to sell twice as much beer. There's going to be a little bit less beer to be sold at each of these locations, and there's only so many SKUs you can fit on a shelf. So, I mean, it's just going to be very, very difficult for people even to get the ability, I guess, to go to market.
So how does a brewery the size of Revolution handle that? I mean, it seems like you guys are, in many ways, sort of in like one of the tougher positions, essentially getting squeezed by some of the larger, more well-resourced breweries that can, perhaps afford to play the price game and kind of push on that lever, or, have a better chain presence, or whatever it may be. And then, some of the smaller guys that are, just a local darling, or they're self-distributing, so they're, kind of beating you there in death by 1,000 cuts sort of thing. You're right smack in the middle, so how are you handling it all?
You handle it from multiple aspects. I mean, I think the number one thing you can do is go back to your distributors. I mean, you have to consistently be better than the next guy or gal. I mean, you have to be. You have to be at your distributors and be always considered to be one of their top 1, 2, or 3 distributor or supplier partners. Because if you're not, you're not going to be able to take it to the next level. I mean, I think you want to always be better than the next guy. And
so there's only 3% in some cases or less of breweries that are being sold that are going to get attention. Is that?
I think that there's only. I always like to use this. This is a good analogy, or a good story. I think that there's 10% of suppliers that are out there in the world that add any value whatsoever to the people that they work with. I think that they show up, they go through the motions, and they do their jobs. I think that there's 80% of the suppliers that are out there that are at doing a good job and not hurting their breweries and doing the right thing by their distributors. And I think then there's 10% of them that are, fucking rock stars, and we strive to be, I tell my people, we strive to be 15. And if we can be in that top 15%, we're going to get share of mind. So I guess if you look at a distributor and they've got, 40 supplier partners, if you can be up there in the top 6, I think you're going to succeed.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, 40 I think is probably average, or that might even be, fewer brands than a lot of these wholesalers are carrying. There are wholesalers out there with 200, 300 brands. So getting into the top 6 there would seem to be a pretty difficult task.
Well, I don't think so. I think it's all communication. I think that if you do a good job of communication and planning, starting with your annual business plans every year and kind of working the plan and checking in with them quarterly, I think the distributor piece is easier than most think. You just need to go in there and build the relationships. But, really to get back to the crux of your question, I really believe that, the real next thing we have to do is we've got to be very strong retail partners. We've got to be the best in class as well as our distributors at our retailers. And this means having somebody that's calling on Walgreens on a regular basis, and Binny's and Jewel-Osco and Kroger and Meijer. And this equates for, a solid 30 to 40% of our overall business and growing. So, I think it's being better at chain as well and understand what the chains are looking for. And the chains aren't always looking for price. They're looking for availability. I think there's enough craft people out there that don't necessarily want to be in certain, aspects of this chain environment, and we're one of the ones that chooses to want to play there. I think we talked about this the last time. And, I think it's being strong stewards of your brand within the chain channel.
Right.
So that's the next step. And, you've got some of the big guys that are over-investing. Lagunitas, I think, made the most aggressive move I've ever seen, and kudos to them. They have somebody that works directly with the Walgreens partner. That's one of the first craft suppliers that's ever, put somebody in working directly with the chain, and it's good to see. It's good to see that chain, that craft breweries are getting opportunities to play with was once an arena just for Miller and Budweiser.
Right. I think Lagunitas is certainly probably the poster child for being able to kind of look out and see what might be coming down the pike and really step on the gas pedal. They went from 80,000 something barrels to 400,000, 600,000, 800,000 barrels in a few short years, and they really went for it, and they sort of saw the window and got through it. Do you think that window's closed now? And if it is closed, did you guys make it through? If it's not closed, at what point do you think you'll make it through? And I'm thinking in terms of sort of the squeeze again.
Yeah, I have no idea. I sure as hell didn't throw the dart the right way the first couple of years as far as predicting where we're going to be. I'm sure not going to predict it on what the market's going to be in a couple of years. As far as windows closing, I think that's a great topic. I think moving into New York, as we tried to move into New York now, because I don't think the window's closing, but I think that, as I talked about, opportunities to get into distributors and get share of mind and get into retailers and get share of mind, I think is definitely closing in marketplaces. I'll put Jim Seaback and his team's beers above anybody else's in the United States, but that doesn't mean that we're going to go into California where there's 680 breweries and go kick ass. I think that market, if it's not closed, is pretty damn close, and we're not going to go into Portland and do the same thing, but I think there's still opportunities in New York. We are an urban brand, and I think that we're going to play well there, but I think our moment is now.
So is that going to inform some of the decisions that are yet to come, just your ability to get in, be a part of that portfolio, and be a part of what retailers are I guess, looking at in terms of their own sets? And, maybe it'll be a little bit ahead of schedule, but, you just feel like you have to be there?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think that, we're going to look for opportunities where our distributor partners are available that need to partner up with a brewery like ours in their space, as much as we would like to partner up with them.
And where are those places?
I think my places are different than where the owner of our companies are. So I would like to be skiing in Colorado on a regular basis, but I don't think we're going there.
Fair enough. Nice. You did a good one dodging that. You're getting good at this, Donn.
There is nobody more nervous in this building tonight than the owner of our company. So he's just waiting for me to say something stupid.
Josh doesn't look nervous. Where is he? I know he doesn't look nervous. He might punch me later, though. All right. Well, Donn, this has been great. I know that some folks probably have some questions for you, which they can certainly ask over beers. I've got sort of one final question for you. When are you going to fill all the tanks here? And do you grow again? If so, how?
You know, I think we can fill all the tanks here. I mean, I do believe we can. I mean, I think we can. Do we grow? You know, that'll be up to Josh to decide. But yes, I think that a brand like Revolution Brewing, with the quality of the liquid and the consistency that we bring to marketplace, you know, it can continue to grow. Do we want to be in 50 states? I don't know, and I don't think so. But I think that there is still a lot of room for a brand like ours to fill what we currently have and to continue to grow the right way, you know, and you know, now probably at the right speed for a long time to come.
And I guess the follow-up to that would be, can you do it as an independent brewer with all the sort of M&A activity that we're seeing out there? And honestly, some of the deals being driven by the fact that, you know, or, you know, even some deals that I think haven't been announced, or, you know, companies that are perhaps out there fishing for a deal, they're out there doing so because they have expanded so quickly, and, you know, now they're kind of stuck. And the banks are calling them up, and they want their money back, and they're in a tight position. So they're out there looking to see what they're worth. So how long can Revolution step on the gas pedal and operate in the way that you guys are before you have to consider some kind of move like that?
You know, and I think we can do so forever. I mean, I would, you know, sometimes think that every time somebody says something like that, there's an announcement tomorrow that we've just sold. But you know, we thrive on the fact that we are Illinois' largest independently owned craft brewery, and I don't see that changing anytime soon.
There we go. Look at that, Donn. I got everybody clapping for you on that. All right.
And that's the truth. I mean, I think that we have got a solid crew here. We have some industry veterans surrounded by some people that, you know, have been in the industry as long as Josh has employed them, and we have got the best brewing staff in the United States. And yes, I think that we can continue to grow forever without them, without any kind of money coming in, because, you know what, at the end of the day, you know what, we get to choose now. Josh gets to choose, and Jim Seaback gets to choose, and his wife gets to choose, you know, how fast we grow or how slow we grow, and we can either slowly grow into this over 20 years, or if the market lets us, maybe we fill these tanks up in 3 or 4 years and we do it again.
Right. Well, you know, it's certainly interesting. I think it's a fair question. It's a lot of, you know, it's a question that I think is on a lot of people's minds. And there are a lot of breweries that are wondering about, you know, how long they can continue to remain independent because, you know, quite frankly, it's getting tougher. It's getting more competitive. You need money to operate. You need money to grow, and it might not always be there. So, you know, kudos to you guys for trying to, you know, stick it out as long as possible independently, and hopefully, like you said, that's forever. Awesome. Thanks, Donn. Cheers.